The whole town feared him, but the governor's daughter's decision changed everything. The town had learned to fear him long before most people could remember why. His name alone made conversation stop. When he walked down the street, doors closed a little faster, and voices dropped into uneasy silence. People said it was safer that way. Fear had become a habit, passed from one generation to the next like an old warning no one dared to question. He lived on the edge of town, in a small, worn house that looked like it had been forgotten by time. The paint was peeling, the fence leaned slightly, and weeds grew freely in the yard. No children ever played near his place. Mothers would pull their sons and daughters closer whenever they passed by, whispering that they should not stare, should not ask questions. No one greeted him in the mornings. When he entered a shop, the air felt heavy. The shopkeeper would watch his hands instead of his face, ready for trouble that never came. He paid quietly, nodded once, and left without saying a word. Even then, people would wait until he was gone before breathing easily again. Yet beneath the fear that followed him like a shadow, he lived a simple and lonely life. He woke early every day before the sun had fully risen. He worked with his hands, fixing broken tools, repairing old furniture, and helping where he could without being asked. He never stayed long. He never explained himself. He had learned that silence was safer than words. Years ago, something had happened. Something bad enough that the town decided who he was without listening to his side. Details were lost over time, replaced by exaggeration and rumor. Some said he had been violent. Others claimed he had done something unforgivable. No one could agree on the story, yet everyone agreed on one thing: he was dangerous. But the truth was quieter than the rumors. He carried his past like a heavy stone in his chest. Every night, when the town slept peacefully, he lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying moments he wished he could change. Not because he was guilty of what people believed, but because he had been there when things went wrong. Being present was enough for the blame to fall on him. He had tried once to explain. Years ago, he stood in front of a crowd, his hands shaking, his voice breaking as he tried to speak. But fear speaks louder than truth. No one listened. No one believed him. After that day, he stopped trying. The town moved on, but he stayed frozen in time. Children grew up hearing stories about him. Teenagers dared each other to walk past his house at night. Adults warned visitors to stay away from him, and he accepted it all without protest, believing that maybe this was his punishment for surviving when others had not. Still, there were moments when his humanity showed through the cracks of isolation. Once, during a harsh winter, he cleared snow from the road leading to town before anyone else woke up. No one knew who did it, but he watched from his window as people walked safely across the cleared path, never suspecting him. Another time, a farmer's cart broke down outside town. Before the farmer could even ask for help, the man silently fixed the wheel and walked away. The farmer told the story later, confused, unsure if he should be grateful or afraid. Fear is powerful. It makes people blind. As days passed, life in the town followed its usual rhythm. The market buzzed with noise. The town hall prepared for an important visit. The governor's daughter was coming to stay for a short time, and excitement filled the streets. Shops were cleaned, roads repaired, and smiles practiced. The man heard about her arrival from a distance, as he always did. He had no interest in important visitors. Powerful people had never brought him anything but trouble. He planned to stay invisible to keep to himself as usual, but the town was changing, even if no one noticed yet. On the morning of her arrival, the man walked through town early, hoping to avoid attention. He kept his head down, his steps steady. Yet, as fate would have it, he passed near the square just as a carriage arrived. People gathered quickly, eager to see the governor's daughter. She stepped down gracefully, her expression calm and observant. Unlike others, she did not smile without thought. Her eyes moved carefully, noticing faces, gestures, and the space between people. That was when she saw him. He stood at the edge of the crowd, separate as always. People unconsciously shifted away from him, creating a quiet circle of distance. The governor's daughter noticed this immediately. She noticed how his shoulders were slightly tense, how his eyes avoided contact, how he looked prepared to leave at the first sign of attention. Something about that moment stayed with her. She did not know his name. She did not know his story, but she recognized loneliness when she saw it. While others focused on her status, her clothes, her importance, she wondered why the town feared one silent man more than anything else. She asked no questions that day. She said nothing, but her curiosity had been awakened. As the man walked away, unaware of her gaze, he felt the familiar weight settle back on his chest. Another day survived, another day unseen for who he truly was. He did not know that this small moment, this brief crossing of paths, would soon change everything he believed about the town, about justice, and about himself. For now, he returned to his quiet house on the edge of town, closing the door behind him as the sun rose higher. The town buzzed with excitement, but his world remained silent, or so he thought, because sometimes all it takes is one person willing to look twice. The next few days passed slowly, but something unseen had already begun to shift. The town remained the same on the surface. People opened their shops, greeted each other with familiar smiles, and spoke about the governor's daughter with excitement. Yet beneath that routine, old thoughts were quietly being questioned for the first time in many years. The man continued his life as he always had. He woke before dawn, washed his face with cold water, and stepped outside to breathe the quiet morning air. Early hours were the only time the town felt safe to him. No judging eyes, no whispered warnings, just empty streets and the sound of birds waking up. He walked to the workshop behind his house, a small shed filled with tools collected over years. Some were broken, some repaired many times, but all had value. He liked working with things that others had thrown away. Broken objects made sense to him. They did not judge. They only needed patience. As the sun rose higher, the town slowly came alive. He avoided busy places when he could, but sometimes it was impossible. Supplies were needed. Life had to go on. So later that morning, he walked toward the market, keeping his pace steady and his eyes lowered. As usual, people noticed him. Conversations paused. A woman pulled her child closer. A man frowned, pretending to check his phone. These reactions no longer surprised him. He had learned to accept them as part of breathing. What he did not notice was that someone was watching him differently. The governor's daughter had chosen to walk through town that day without a crowd around her. She wanted to see the place as it truly was, not as people prepared it for her. She wore simple clothes and moved quietly, listening more than speaking. She noticed the man again near the market. This time, she watched longer. She saw how he waited patiently while others were served first. She saw how he thanked the shopkeeper with a small nod, even when the shopkeeper barely met his eyes. She noticed that he never reacted with anger or frustration, even when people treated him with cold distance. Most of all, she noticed how alone he was. Her curiosity grew, but she did not approach him. Not yet. She knew how quickly the town watched her movements. Any wrong step would cause more trouble than answers. Instead, she began to ask gentle questions to others, careful not to sound confrontational. At first, people responded quickly as if they had practiced these answers many times. "He's dangerous," one woman said firmly. "You should stay away," another warned. "He's not normal," a shopkeeper whispered. But when she asked why, their voices changed. Some avoided eye contact. Some shrugged. Others repeated stories they had clearly not witnessed themselves. The details never matched. The reasons shifted. Fear remained, but truth did not. That unsettled her. Meanwhile, the man felt something unusual following him through his days. It was not fear. He knew that feeling well. This was different. It was the sense of being noticed, not as a threat, but as a person. He could not explain it, but it made him uneasy. He reminded himself not to imagine things. Hope was dangerous. Hope had hurt him before. That afternoon, a sudden problem struck the town. A water pipe near the old square burst, flooding part of the road. People gathered quickly, confused and upset. No one knew what to do. The local workers argued, unsure how to fix it quickly. The man saw the trouble from a distance. He hesitated. Helping always came with risks. Attention could turn dangerous, but water kept spreading and people were slipping. A child nearly fell. Without a word, he stepped forward. He examined the pipe, his movements calm and practiced. He asked for no permission. Using tools he carried, he worked carefully, ignoring the stares. Within a short time, the water slowed, then stopped. The danger passed. For a moment, the town stood silent. Then people slowly returned to their conversations, pretending nothing unusual had happened. No one thanked him. No one apologized. He wiped his hands and walked away, but the governor's daughter had seen everything. She saw how naturally he helped, how focused he was on solving the problem, not gaining praise. She saw how quickly the town accepted his help but refused to accept him. That moment made her decision clear. Later that evening, she stood near the edge of town, watching the sun lower behind the hills. The man passed by on his way home, unaware of her presence. She spoke gently, not loudly, just enough for him to hear. "Thank you for fixing the pipe today." He stopped. Slowly he turned, surprise clear in his eyes. People rarely addressed him directly and never kindly. He hesitated, unsure if he had heard correctly. "It needed fixing," he replied simply. There was no anger in his voice, no pride, just honesty. She nodded. Still, not everyone would have stepped in. The silence between them was heavy but not uncomfortable. He did not know who she was at first, only that she spoke without fear. "You're new here," he said carefully. "Yes," she replied, "but you've been here a long time." He looked away, too long. She did not push him. She understood that trust did not come easily to those who had been judged for years. They spoke only a few more words before parting ways. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud. Yet that brief exchange carried more weight than either of them realized. That night, the man lay awake longer than usual. Her words replayed in his mind. Not the content, but the tone, respect, recognition. He had almost forgotten what that felt like. At the same time, the governor's daughter sat alone, thinking deeply. She felt a growing discomfort with the town's behavior, fear without understanding, judgment without proof, silence used as a shield. She knew her position carried influence. But influence came with responsibility. The next day, whispers began. People noticed that she had spoken to him. Some were shocked, others were concerned, a few were angry. How could she, of all people, speak to him? The man noticed the change immediately. The stares grew sharper, the distance wider. He understood the pattern well. Someone had noticed. Trouble often followed. He considered leaving town altogether. He had thought about it many times before, but something held him back now, a fragile thread of curiosity. Maybe even hope. As the days continued, the governor's daughter did not avoid him. She did not seek him out either. She simply treated him like anyone else when their paths crossed. A greeting, a nod, simple acts that quietly challenged the town's long-held fear. People began to feel uncomfortable. Their beliefs were being tested without words. The man felt torn inside. Part of him wanted to retreat to protect himself from disappointment. Another part, long silent, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. He knew one thing for certain. Whatever was coming next would force the town and himself to face the truth they had avoided for years. And this time, silence would not be enough. The change did not come loudly. It arrived quietly, through small moments that made people uncomfortable because they forced them to think. The governor's daughter continued her days in town with calm confidence, but now her attention was more focused. She no longer accepted answers that were built only on fear. The man felt the tension growing around him. People whispered more openly now. Some looked at him with anger, others with confusion. A few even looked embarrassed. He recognized those looks. They meant that something old was being questioned. He tried to stay invisible, but it was no longer possible. One afternoon, as he worked behind his house, fixing a broken chair, footsteps approached. He froze for a moment, then slowly stood. It was her again. She stopped at a respectful distance, not crossing into his space without permission. That alone surprised him. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," she said. "You're not," he replied after a pause. She looked at the chair, then at the tools. "You repair things?" "Yes." "Why?" The question caught him off guard. No one had ever asked him that before. He thought for a moment. "Because broken things deserve a second chance." She smiled gently, not in a way that felt forced or polite. It was thoughtful, almost sad. "May I sit?" she asked, pointing to a nearby stone. He nodded. They sat in silence for a few moments. The air was still. There was no rush. "I've been asking about you," she said finally. He stiffened. "That's not a good idea." "I know," she replied honestly. "Most people only repeat what they've heard, but their stories don't match." He laughed quietly without humor. "They never do." "Would you tell me your story?" she asked. "Not the one they tell, yours." He shook his head at first. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me," she said. That was when something inside him shifted. Not fully, but enough to crack the wall he had built around himself. He did not speak right away. Instead, he picked up the chair again and continued working as he talked. It made it easier. He told her about arriving in town years ago, young and hopeful. He spoke about working hard, keeping to himself, trying to build a quiet life. He explained how one incident had changed everything. How he had been present when something went wrong, how fear needed someone to blame, and how he had been the easiest choice. He told her how no one listened, how silence slowly became his shield, how every day after that had been about survival, not living. She listened without interrupting. She did not look away, she did not judge. When he finished, his hands were shaking slightly. "That's all?" she asked softly. "That's enough," he replied. She nodded. "Thank you for trusting me." He looked at her carefully. "Why are you doing this?" "Because I've seen what fear can do," she said, "and I don't believe a town should be built on it." Word spread quickly after that. People noticed her spending time near his house. They saw her listening to him, asking questions, treating him like a human being. The town reacted strongly. Some were angry. They said she was being careless, that she did not understand the danger. Others were afraid. Fear does not like to be challenged. It feels threatened when questioned. A few, however, began to feel something else: doubt. The governor himself heard the whispers. Concerned, he asked his daughter about it. "I know what people are saying," she told him calmly, "but I also know what I've seen." "This town has believed these stories for years," he replied. "That doesn't make them true," she said. Her words stayed with him. Meanwhile, pressure began to build around the man. Old accusations were brought up again. Some people demanded that he leave town. Others warned him indirectly, reminding him of how things had been before. He felt the familiar urge to run. One evening, he packed a small bag. He stood in his doorway, looking at the house that had been both his shelter and his prison. Leaving would be easy. Staying felt dangerous. That was when she arrived. "You're leaving," she said quietly. "I don't belong here," he replied. "You belong wherever truth is allowed to exist," she said. He looked at her, tired. "Truth hasn't helped me much." "Then let me help you," she said. He hesitated. Trust was hard, but something in her voice felt steady, real. The next day she did something that shocked the town. She called for a small public meeting. People gathered, curious and nervous. The man stood at the edge, unsure why he had come at all. His heart pounded in his chest. She spoke clearly and calmly. "I have listened to your stories," she said, "but I have also listened to him." Murmurs spread. "You fear him because you were told to," she continued, "not because you truly know him." People protested. Voices rose. She raised her hand gently. "I am not asking you to like him, I am asking you to be honest." She invited him forward. Every step felt heavy. Memories of the past crowded his mind. He almost turned back, but he didn't. He spoke, slowly at first, then stronger. He told his story again, this time to the town that had shaped his loneliness. Some people looked away. Some cried. Some stayed angry, but something important happened. They listened. Not everyone believed him. Not everyone changed their mind. But the silence that had protected fear was broken. That day did not fix everything, but it changed the direction of the town. The man returned home exhausted but lighter. For the first time in years, he felt seen. The governor's daughter watched the town closely. She knew change took time, but she also knew that once truth was spoken aloud, it could not be forgotten, and the town would never be the same again. The days after the public meeting felt heavy, as if the town itself was holding its breath. People went about their routines, but nothing felt normal anymore. Words spoken in the open could not be taken back, and the truth had begun to move quietly through homes, shops, and hearts. The man woke the next morning feeling exhausted. His body ached, but his mind was restless. Speaking in front of the town had taken more strength than he knew he still had. For years, he had trained himself not to hope. Now hope had found him anyway, and it felt unfamiliar, almost frightening. When he stepped outside, the street looked the same, but the reactions were different. Some people avoided his eyes as usual. Others watched him with uncertainty, no longer sure how to treat him. A few nodded politely, small gestures that meant more than they realized. He did not know how to respond yet, so he simply nodded back and kept walking. The governor's daughter spent her days listening. She visited homes, spoke with elders, and sat quietly with people who wanted to talk. She did not argue or accuse. She asked questions, gentle ones, honest ones. "What do you actually know?" she asked. "Were you there? How long have you believed this?" These questions unsettled people. Many realized they had built their fear on stories told by others, not on facts. Some felt ashamed. Others became defensive. Change was uncomfortable, and not everyone welcomed it. Meanwhile, the governor began to look deeper into the past incident that had shaped the man's fate. Records were reviewed. Old reports were reopened. People who had stayed silent for years were asked to speak. At first, there was resistance. Why bring this up now? It's better left alone. But the governor was persistent. He believed in responsibility, and now he believed his daughter was right. Slowly, pieces of the past came together. Witnesses remembered details they had once ignored. Small facts that did not fit the old story began to surface. The incident had been rushed, the blame placed too quickly. Fear had made the town impatient for answers, and the man had paid the price. When this information reached the people, reactions were mixed. Some refused to accept it. Admitting the truth meant admitting they had been wrong for years. That was hard. Others felt regret settle deeply in their chests. They remembered moments when they could have been kinder. Moments when they chose silence instead. The man felt the shift even without hearing all the details. The weight he had carried for so long began to feel lighter, but it did not disappear completely. Pain does not vanish just because truth arrives late. One afternoon, an elderly woman knocked on his door. He opened it cautiously. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice trembling. He did not know what to say. Apologies were rare in his world. "I believed things I never saw," she continued. "I'm sorry." He nodded slowly. "Thank you for saying that." She left quietly, tears in her eyes. More moments like that followed. Not many, but enough to make him realize that something real was happening. Still, not everyone was ready to change. A small group grew louder in their anger. They claimed the town was being manipulated. They accused the governor's daughter of favoritism. Fear fought back when it felt cornered. The man felt caught in the middle. He did not want to be the reason the town divided itself. Part of him wished he could disappear again, return to silence if it meant peace. He shared these thoughts with her one evening as they walked along the edge of town. "I never wanted to cause trouble," he said. "You didn't," she replied. "Trouble existed long before you spoke." He sighed. "I don't know how to live like this, being seen." She stopped walking and looked at him. "Being seen is not a burden, it's a right." Her words stayed with him. That night the governor announced that the findings would be shared publicly. A final review would take place. Truth would be written clearly, not whispered. The town gathered again, quieter this time, less angry, more nervous. The governor spoke carefully. He explained what had been discovered, what had been overlooked, and what had gone wrong years ago. He acknowledged the town's role in allowing fear to replace fairness. Then he did something unexpected. He apologized, not as a politician, but as a leader and a neighbor. The silence that followed was deep. The man stood there, listening, feeling emotions rise that he had buried for years. Relief, sadness, anger, and something close to peace. People looked at him differently now, not all with kindness but with understanding. After the meeting, the town did not suddenly become perfect. Healing does not work that way, but conversations changed. Children stopped being warned to stay away. Shopkeepers greeted him without fear. The distance between him and the town slowly closed. One morning, he was offered work repairing tools for others openly, not secretly. He hesitated, then accepted. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years in shadow. The governor's daughter watched all of this with quiet satisfaction. She knew her role was not to save anyone but to open doors that had been locked by fear. As she prepared to leave town, she met him one last time. "You changed everything," he told her. "No," she said softly. "You did, I just listened." As she left, the town stood at a crossroads. The past had been faced and the future was uncertain but hopeful. For the man, life was still simple, still quiet. But it was no longer lonely. And for the town, the lesson would remain long after she was gone. Fear may build walls, but truth has a way of bringing them down. Time moved forward, quietly but steadily, and the town moved with it. The changes that had begun slowly did not stop after the governor's daughter left. In some ways, her absence made the truth stand on its own. There was no longer anyone powerful to hide behind, no visitor to blame or praise. What remained was the town itself and the man it had once feared. At first, things felt uncertain. Habits formed over many years do not disappear quickly. Some people still felt awkward around him. Others were unsure how to act, afraid of saying the wrong thing. But fear no longer ruled their actions. It had lost its voice. The man settled into a new rhythm of life. He opened his workshop more openly now, the doors no longer closed in secrecy. People began bringing him broken tools, chairs, and household items. At first, they came quietly, almost nervously, as if expecting rejection. He treated them all the same way, with patience, respect, and skill. Word spread that he did good work, honest work. Soon, neighbors who once avoided him found themselves standing in his doorway, talking about ordinary things. Weather, work, family, small conversations that meant more than grand speeches ever could. He listened more than he spoke. He had spent many years learning how to do that. Children who once crossed the street when they saw him now watched curiously as he worked. One day, a young boy stood nearby for a long time, fascinated by the tools. "Can I help?" the boy finally asked. The man paused, surprised. Then he smiled, a real smile, one he hadn't used in years. "Carefully," he said. That moment stayed with him long after the boy left. It felt like proof that the future did not have to carry the same weight as the past. The town itself began to change in small but important ways. People talked more openly about mistakes they had made, not just about him, but about other moments when fear had guided their choices. The story of what happened years ago became a lesson, told carefully, without exaggeration. "Listen before you judge," parents said to their children. "Ask questions," teachers reminded their students. The governor kept his promise. Official records were corrected. The truth was written clearly, not hidden in quiet corners. It did not erase the pain of the past, but it honored it by refusing to repeat it. The man was offered help, support, opportunities, even the chance to leave town and start fresh somewhere else. He thought about it carefully. In the end, he chose to stay. "This is where my story broke," he said quietly, "and this is where it healed." People respected that choice. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky turned soft shades of gold and blue, the town gathered for a simple event in the square. No speeches, no grand plans, just music, food, and shared space, something the town had not done freely in a long time. The man stood at the edge at first, unsure. Old instincts whispered that it was safer to watch from a distance, but then someone waved him over. Then another. He stepped forward. No one moved away. As he stood there, surrounded by people who once feared him, he felt a quiet sense of closure. Not because everything was perfect, but because it was honest. Later that night, he walked home slowly, the air cool and calm. He thought about the past, but it no longer felt like a chain around his chest. It felt like a chapter that had finally been read fully, not just skimmed and misunderstood. He stopped for a moment and looked back at the town. Lights glowed softly in windows. Laughter drifted faintly through the air, ordinary sounds of life. He realized something important then. The governor's daughter had changed things, yes, but what truly changed everything was the moment the town chose to listen. The moment it chose courage over comfort, truth over habit. Fear had once defined him. Now he was simply a man, a neighbor, a part of the town's story, not its warning. And the town, once ruled by whispers, had learned that a single brave decision, followed by honesty, can reshape an entire future. The lesson would be remembered, not as a tale of fear, but as a reminder of what happens when people choose understanding instead. The story did not end with applause or celebration. It ended with something far more meaningful: peace.